Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm honored to be part of the SaaS DFIR Summit 2024. I regret that I'm unable to be there with you in person due to some unexpected challenges in expediting my visa appointment. Nonetheless, I'm excited to share insights and lessons that we've learned in responding to one of the most sophisticated threat actors in the cloud, Scattered Spider. Okay, so before we start talking about these key players, these so-called cloud kleptos. These actors have made quite a name for themselves in the cloud security landscape, and we've had our hands full dealing with them. But before we start and diving into the specifics, let's first get an overview of what we'll be discussing. The agenda will give us a structured look at the main points that we'll cover. Okay, so I'll begin by introducing myself, sharing a bit about my background, and providing insights into the work that we do at Permiso. This will set the stage for the expertise that we bring into this discussion. Next, we'll dive into understanding Lucre 3, these scattered spiders, who they are, their mission, and why they pose a significant threat. This will give us context on why these actors required our focused attention. We'll then explore modern tactics they employ in cloud environments. I'll provide a high-level overview and touch each of their key strategies. Then we'll delve into the TTPs, particularly in identity providers, SaaS and IaaS environments. Our main focus for today will be IaaS with a deeper dive into AWS since it's their primary target. And finally, I'll wrap up by summarizing our discussion of these threat actors, followed by a Q&A session where I'll address any questions that you may have. Okay, so first up, introduction. My name is Abjan Marina. I'm from a small city called Jakova in Kosovo. I recently completed my bachelor studies last year. My journey into cybersecurity started at a young age when I found myself curious about hacking, initially through hacking video games. It wasn't long before I realized that this curiosity could evolve into a legitimate career path. I dedicated myself in cybersecurity by attending various courses and workshops available in Kosovo. One notable moment was when I had the privilege of meeting Daniel Bahanen during a workshop. Daniel had been sent from US to share his expertise with students in Kosovo, and little did I know, just a year later, I would start my internship at Permiso Security under Daniel's mentorship. After just 3 months as an intern, I was promoted, and now I'm a full-time associate threat researcher here at Permiso. In my current role, I focus on investigating malicious activity, researching new detection techniques, and developing tools to strengthen cloud security. I work closely with our PO Labs team to detect and respond to sophisticated threats, ensuring that our clients' cloud infrastructure remains secure. Permiso as a company acts as a vigilant defender in the cloud, protecting both human and non-human identities across IDP, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS layers by leveraging machine learning and over 1,000 detection rules. We help organizations strengthen their identity security posture, ensuring that only high-fidelity alerts are triggered for genuine threats, such as groups like Scattered Spiders. Okay, now that we've set the stage and introduction and an overview of what we do here at Permiso, let's circle back to our agenda where we'll dive into the fun part, understanding Lucre 3. Okay, so who's Lucre 3? Lucre 3, that's our name for this group, right? Every organization tends to have their own naming convention, and this is ours. The Lucre label signifies financially motivated threat actors, and 3 means it's our third graduated group in that cluster. You might know this group better as Scattered Spider, a name that's been widely recognized in cybersecurity community. However, there's a lot of overlap with other names that you might have heard. For instance, Mandiant refers to them as ONC3944, and you'll also hear them being called Octopus or Roasted Octopus in various reports. Microsoft initially called them Storm 0875 before transitioning into the name Octotempest. I included Lucre 1 here just as a reference to show where the Lucre naming comes from. It's important to note that Lucre 1 is completely a different group. from Lucre 3, and Lucre 3 will be our main focus for today. Okay, mission-wise, Lucre 3 is all about financial gain. Their journey started with small-scale activities like Roblox card schemes, gift card schemes. This was where they got their first feet wet. From there, they transitioned into the crypto mining phase, but they didn't stop at that. They quickly moved into extortion. And when I'm talking about extortion, we're talking big extortion, millions of dollars on average in extortion requests. What's particularly notable about Lucre 3 is their persistence. Just 3 months after a successful extortion, they're often back trying to strike again. If a company paid extortion fee, Lucre 3 will bank on the idea that they might pay it again. And if the company didn't pay the first time, these guys will aim to make the situation even more painful the next time around, increasing the pressure to get what they want. Okay, Lucre 3 initially target telecoms, leveraging SIM swapping tactics to gain control of phone numbers. This was their bread and butter early on. Then after telecoms, they shifted to big software firms, focusing on stealing code signing certs and source code, which allowed them to demand high extortion fee. They worked this angle for about a year until it became less profitable. As opportunities in software dried up, they expanded into other industries like gaming and healthcare, focusing on each sector for a few months and then moving on to the next. Recently, however, their targeting has been less predictable, as they're now hitting multiple identities at once, showing their persistent pursuit of financial gain. Okay, so first thing we need to know about Lucre 3, they really do their homework before making a move. When they decide to infiltrate an organization, they aim high. They go after accounts that don't require privilege escalations once they're in. There are 3 types of personas that they almost always target. First is identity admins. These are the folks managing Azure AD, Okta, and basically controlling access to everything. If they can compromise one of these accounts, they've hit the jackpot. Second, if their goal isn't stealing intellectual property, but rather disrupting serious services, like in gaming industry, they go after sysadmins. These are the people keeping everything running, so taking them down can cause a lot of damage. And 3, there's us, the security folks. We often have elevated privileges, and let's be honest, sometimes we whitelist ourselves and don't pay much attention to our own activities. Lucre 3 loves this. They want us to be to know that they've been inside the environment, but only when they're ready to make their move and extort us. What set Lucre 3 apart is their willingness to just pick up the phone. When they are dealing with some troubleshooting, they have issues, they don't hesitate to call the help desk and social engineer their way through the problems, but instead on relying on technical troubleshooting themselves. GUI tooling, they use a lot of GUI tooling based like S3 browser, which I'll get into that later. Very little malware used. In the cloud and SaaS environments, they rarely use malware. When they do engage on-prem, it's often with classic and well-known techniques. They're opportunistic about the tooling that they use. They don't care if you're using Slack or Teams, or if you have Notion or Confluence. They'll use whatever tooling you have against you. And finally, they love to watch and learn what you're doing, gathering intel to make their attack more effective. Okay, with a clear understanding of Lucre 3, let's return to our agenda. Next up, we'll dive into the modern cloud attack tactics. This section will explore the methods and strategies that group like Lucre 3 will be using to exploit the environments today. So let's take a high-level overview of modern cloud attacks. When people talk about cloud attacks, they often focus only on the AWS or Azure portions, but that's just one part of the picture. The reality is everything is interconnected, starting from the IDP. So initial access often begins with IDP, and once they're in, the attacker focus on learning about your environment. They'll move into your SaaS portals, running queries just like a regular user. What makes these attackers effective is that they blend in. They look just like a normal admin doing their job. They use SaaS to gather information needed to carry out their mission, and either targeting your IaaS layer for credential harvesting and data theft, or diving into your CI/CD pipeline to steal source code and source code signing certs. By the time they're executing their mission, they've gathered everything that they need to go through your environment. Okay, let's talk about the IDP side. They're doing their research, as I said, they pick a persona. They pick a person that they know where they live at, so they can emulate that access pattern. So much so, in specific engagements, the attacker was coming from the same exact ASN as the victim user normally comes from. And with access patterns being so similar from the IR stance, is very hard to tell good from bad. Adding to that, they're using residential proxies to get close enough to avoid triggering any geolocation or feasibility rules. This means they can log in from a location that look very similar to where legitimate users would come from, and further complicating detection. When it comes to credentials, they'll do anything it takes to get them. They're going to buy, coerce, or bribe their way into creds. Sometimes they'll even set up targeted phishing infrastructure specifically to harvest those credentials. Once they got the creds, getting past MFA can be as simple as a SIM swap or a push fatigue. Even with hardware tokens, which are solid defense, it's not a guaranteed barrier. They'll still pick up the phone and say, like, hey, for $2,000, can you just push a button for me? And once they're in, they know how difficult it was, so they make sure they don't have to go through that again. They immediately register their own MFA device, often downgrading the MFA from their MFA to SMS for easier access. They'll also add an email for password resets to further secure their control. There are some hunting opportunities here as well. For example, how many people in your environment have more than one phone? You'll likely find a few, but it shouldn't be too many. How many people switch platforms? We've only seen these attackers register Apple devices, never Android. So how often do you see someone go from Android to Apple or back? You might see a bit around holidays, but it's rare and should be a small enough data set to hunt through. Next, how often do you see someone with an iPhone 15, let's say, suddenly register an iPhone 11 or 12? No one really downgrades phone, right? These abnormal patterns you need to watch for when you're not dealing with straightforward malware. These are the types of things that you got to think about when detecting these types of activities in your environment. What's just a little, abnormal from the standard usage? Next up, how many people actually share phones? These attackers will compromise multiple identities, but only use like a couple of phones, right? They only have a couple of phones around them, and they're gonna register the same device over and over again. So keep an eye for common DT hashes or device IDs across multiple accounts, depending on the platform that you're using. That's a key indicator. The downgrade factor, as I mentioned, often downgrading the MFA from their previous MFA to SMS for easier attack or easier login. Okay, let's move to SaaS. So the challenge in detecting these threats lies in the fact that there's no malware involved, as I said. So attackers use same API and APIs and function as legitimate users, making it hard to distinguish between normal and malicious activity. Once they gain initial access through your IDP, they'll move it quickly and learn as much as they can about your environment, often sharing and exploring knowledge sharing resources like wikis or Confluence. These search terms, as you can see here, can reveal the intent of attackers in ways that few other artifacts can. For instance, Scattered Spider has been seen using specific search terms across multiple environments. As you can see here highlighted, AKIA, it's for AWS credentials, clearly indicating they're hunting for access keys. Similarly, when they search something like, we can see here, Shodan API key or Twilio API key, it's not the actual key that they want, but the script that references it to understand how you're enriching data. Another crucial detection opportunity is monitoring user behavior patterns. For example, if a long employee suddenly starts and accessing applications like, let's say, GitHub, which they've never used before, that's a significant red flag. From a least privilege standpoint, these are likely applications that should have been removed from their access a long time ago. However, enforcing least privilege effectively is a challenge for most organizations, making it essential to investigate such anomalies. For defense evasion in 365s, attackers often cover their tracks by setting up automated email detection rules. So what they're doing is, so you get an email when you change the MFA, for example, they usually just go shift delete. So they're gonna hard delete everything. They use less common filters to automate that, like body contains, to target specific terms in body of an email, ensuring any communication could expose them is automatically deleted. This tactic effectively hides their activity and makes detection even more challenging. Okay, now that we've covered IDP and SaaS attacks, let's move into exploring the AWS TTPs. Okay, so in the IaaS side of things, where attackers are often most active and explore how they operate, starting with tools like S3 browser. As I mentioned at the beginning, S3 browser is a popular tool among legitimate users, but its appearance in your environment can be a red flag if not commonly used. One of the first things that to assess is whenever S3 browser is regularly relied upon by your team, or if its sudden presence marks an anomaly. For example, pay attention actually when an existing identity, which typically interacts with AWS through other means like Boto3, CLI, or AWS Management Console, suddenly just switches to using S3 browser. This shift behavior could indicate that the identity has been compromised, or that someone is trying to perform actions quietly under the radar. Particularly concentrating is when S3 browser is used for IAM functions, such as interacting new users, updating login profiles, or altering permissions. These tasks are usually managed through more secure and auditable channels like CLI or Management Console. So if these sensitive actions are being carried through S3 browser, it's a strong indication that something unusual or potentially malicious is happening here. Once the attackers gain access to AWS account, they start with enumeration, just as you would do when exploring a new environment. They often assume roles through services like Okta to gain admin access. Everything may appear legitimate. So MFA is in place and all seems normal. However, they quickly move to the billing console to follow the money. They target high spend services like Lambda, DynamoDB, and RDS, and take note of the tags and the naming convention that to blend in. Attackers frequently use SSM to run scripts, such as software inventory gathers on all EC2 instances, rather than running these scripts just once. They're scheduled to execute every 30 minutes, maintaining a persistent presence and continuously gathering data. Targeting critical credentials. So attackers focus on AWS Secrets Manager when they can access rarely rotated critical credentials like VPN strings or Salesforce authentication keys. They use Cloud Shell, a method that is rarely seen in legitimate operations, to extract these secrets by looping through secrets with get secret value command. They often pull information that they need. So Cloud Shell interacting with Secrets Manager is a major red flag. They also do file upload and download via Cloud Shell. So attackers upload and download files using Cloud Shell. They replace the instance profile to grant EC2 instances over permissive roles, often using just ** policy. Instead of creating a new user or access key, they quietly add login profile to an existing account, setting passwords, and take over those identities. Disabling guard duty is typically one of their first moves. While many security teams have rules to detect this, it often creates more noise than it's worth. More interesting, attackers delete guard duty invitation and dissociate from the master account, making it more challenging to re-enable guard duty. Stop logging. Well, attackers believe that stop logging will halt all the logs, but in reality, it just prevents logs from being sent to their destinations. Logs will still be created, meaning that if you monitor the API, they can still capture all these events. The main goal for them remains data theft, often with extortion purposes. Resource hijacking is also part of their strategy, although it seems more secondary. Also check out for EC2 instances anomalies. Attackers often enable serial console access and use EC2 Instance Connect or SSH Connect. They frequently create large, expensive EC2 instances and install Windows on them, which is unusual and should stand out in monitoring. Identifying such outliers is a strong indication that something is amiss. Okay, in the summary, we'll revisit the key points we discussed today and reveal some open source tooling to help with these attacks. Okay, so let's get back into identity providers and what makes them such a prime target for these attackers. The mission here is straightforward: gain access to your cloud SaaS and CI/CD pipelines, environments, and use that access for impersonation. Once they can impersonate a legitimate user, they can move around your organization and often going unnoticed for extended periods. Now, how do they pull this off? First up is password spraying, a classic technique where attackers try a small set of common passwords across many accounts, banking on the fact that people often reuse passwords. It's simple, but it's effective. Next, we have purchase of credentials. Attackers can buy compromised credentials on the dark web, which gives them instant access to your systems without even having to break themselves. Then there's push fatigue, a tactic where they flood the user with MFA push notification until the user, out of frustration or confusion, approves the login attempt. And once that happens, the attacker is in. And let's not forget about SIM swapping. By taking control of a user's phone number, attackers can intercept those all-important SMS-based MFA codes, making it easier to bypass your security controls. Okay, there's some open source tooling to help with these attacks. So first up is Cloud Grappler, a powerful open source tool created by my friend on the Ameti. This tool specifically is designed for detecting threat threats in cloud, with a particular focus on persistent threat groups like Lucre3. This tool enables you to detect persistence of these threat actors in your environment. Next, we have the Cloud Console Cartographer, which is an open source tool developed by Daniel Bahanan and Ondi Ameti. This tool is valuable for security teams as it simplifies the process of understanding the logs generated by AWS console activities. So often these logs can be complex and difficult to understand, but with this tool, you'll get a clear connection between API calls. So we're gonna briefly show how these tools can be utilized in real scenarios. So with these attacks, with these attackers like Lucre3 becoming more sophisticated, it's important to have tools that can identify and spot these indicators. So what makes Cloud Grappler so, wait, can I? Okay. So what makes this so awesome is that it can include multiple cloud providers. As you can see here, it's AWS and Azure as well. This cross-platform capability gives you a comprehensive view of the entire cloud environment. Now let's break down the screenshots. So on the left, we can see how it's set up to pull the data from needs. And on the right, we can see the tool uses predefined queries to search through data and to look for specific TTPs, those that are associated with threats like Lucre3 here. And on the bottom, you can see the tool outputs, which flags potential threats with a clear indicator that severity and help security teams to quickly understand the risk and prioritize the response efforts. And next we have Cloud Console Cartographer, another open source tool that I talked about. Is designed to help security teams make sense of Cloud Console logs. So this tool correlates API calls and events logged in your environment, providing a clear summary of what's happening within your AWS console. This can be useful for identifying potentially malicious activities, such as, let's say, IAM user creation or suspicious use of secrets manager or other abnormal behavior that might otherwise go unnoticed in data logs. Now, looking at the screenshots, you can see in the tool presents, like on the right, you've got the command line interface that outputs a detailed event summary showing every significant action taken within the AWS console. And on the left here, there's a user-friendly web interface that offers a more visual representation of these events, allowing you to easily filter and search through data. Okay, that wraps up our session for today. I want to thank you for your time and attention as we explored the complex landscape of cloud security. Down below, you'll find the links to open source tools that I've mentioned. Both of these tools are available on GitHub, and I encourage you to explore them more. If you have any questions now or even after presentation or want to connect, feel free to reach me out on LinkedIn or Twitter. So thank you for your time.